Join me in watching Marley and Scrooge.
To Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
You will be haunted by three spirits.
I think I'd rather not.
I'm Christmas present. Ho, ho, ho.
You may be a bit of undigested beef, a fragment of an underdone potato.
Scrooge is getting worse.
Bahama.
This week we are looking at Scrooge and Marley, a 2012 modern LGBT adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And to state it plainly, the premise is the strongest aspect of this film. Scrooge is now Ben Scrooge, a gay piano bar owner in Chicago. The whole story is built around counterculture, chosen family, rejection, survival, and the damage that can come from cutting yourself off from your own community. That is a strong idea, but unfortunately, that's about as impressive as this film gets. The production itself is very low budget. Sometimes that is charming, and sometimes it is clear that we are looking at cotton snow and ghost effects from an entirely different decade. But there's real thought put into how A Christmas Carol can be shifted into this world. Fred becomes Freda, Belle becomes Bill, Bob Cratchit has a husband and adopted children, the charity collectors are collecting for the queer community. Also, the cast has some notable names. Scrooge is played by David Pinsner, who's been on Modern Family, Grey's Anatomy, Silicon Valley, and NCIS. Marley is played by Tim Kazurinsky, who was the wizard on the stage performance of Wicked. Christmas Present is played by Megan Knopf, who is the voice of Jimmy's mom in Jimmy Neutron. And Freda is played by Rusty Swimmer, who of course everyone knows from Jason Goes to Hell and other roles. The movie opens in a very strange place. Marley is already in the afterlife. He is begging for release from all his chains, and these floating supernatural heads basically explain the rules of his punishment. Marley learns that there is a loophole that if he can reform someone truly awful, he can help himself by helping others. And whenever I see the supernatural tribunal of floating heads starting to explain the rules of a deal, my brain goes straight to the dream demons from Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. You know, those ancient floating demon heads who show up right before Freddy Krueger dies and offers him eternal dream murder powers. No one else? Yeah, figured. Oh well, moving on. Then we get a second opening, with Judith Light narrating over Christmas in Chicago. At the bar, there are people singing, drinking, performing, joking, and trying to keep Christmas in their own way. Scrooge is in the back office avoiding it all. It is a very clever replacement for the counting house. Having the isolated Scrooge hiding in the back of a bar, which is supposed to be social and lively, lays out the building block for tension plainly. Following a similar beat to the Christmas Carol, he refuses to donate to a queer community center, he refuses Bob Cratchit's health care proposal, he treats his employees badly, and he refuses to visit his niece Freda and her partner Mary for Christmas. So the Dickens structure is very clear. But this version also gives Scrooge a very specific wound. Freda is born on Christmas Day, and Scrooge's sister Franny died giving birth to her.
My sister, Franny, she died.
Oh my God.
She died during childbirth. Apparently, I now have a niece named Frida. If it hadn't been for that baby, she would stay.
You can't blame a baby.
So just like many versions that make Scrooge resent Christmas because of loss, this one ties his resentment directly into his own living family. Then Scrooge goes upstairs, eats his usual depressing Christmas Eve dinner when Marley arrives. Tim K's Marley is very fun. Between the horror movie standard makeup, the generic chain rattling warning, and the little bit of cosmic energy, there's something there, but there's not much to it. Marley warns Scrooge that three spirits are coming, and we move directly into Christmas Past. Christmas Past looked like Randy, an employee Scrooge fired earlier that night. Then Past takes Scrooge back to the 1970s. Young Scrooge is thrown out by his father after getting caught with another boy. He is rejected by his family and left to survive. He then meets young Jacob Marley, who brings them to Fezziwig's Club. This Fezziwig is very different from the Dickens, but the role still works. In the novel, Fezziwig represents warmth, celebration, generosity, and a world Scrooge eventually turns away from. Here, Club represents freedom, joy, and a celebration of 1970s gay nightlife. It is loud, sexual, theatric, messy, welcoming, and alive. Again, conceptually, it's a solid idea. Fezziwig becomes a symbol of community that takes Ben in when his biological family rejects. At the same time, this section shows one of the movie's biggest weakness, the dialogue.
Cat got your tongue? Handy remedy. The dictionary. Use it all the time. Use your vocabulary. Words, Ben. Words will be your tools, your weapons.
At Fezziwig, Ben meets Bill, the Belle of this film. Their relationship is probably the emotional center of this movie. Bill loves Ben, gives comfort after Franny dies, and keeps trying to pull him towards real life instead of a defensive life built around money. But Ben's fear hardens into ambition. He and Marley start to expand the business, and they even trick Fezziwig into signing over control of the club. So the man who took Ben in when he had nowhere else to go is pushed out by the person he helped save. Again, a solid idea for a Christmas Carol. It really shows how history of hurt can turn someone into selfishness, and it causes Bill to leave. Later, Bill gets sick and asks for Ben, and Ben refuses to go. The movie does not directly spell it out in detail, but the implication is clear enough. Bill dies during the AIDS crisis, and Ben chooses not to be there. It is devastating, and it gives this version a real specific moral weight. Scrooge's sin is not simply that he loves money. It is that he survives by emotionally abandoning people. We then move on to Christmas Present. She arrives with a musical number because, of course, there has to be surprise singing.
Welcome to Christmas Present. Now is the time for merriment.
Present takes Scrooge to Freda and Mary's party. Freda fills the role of Fred, but Mary gets a lot of the emotional defense of Scrooge, which gives the family scene a little more texture. Because Mary has no obligation to love this man, yet she still wants to believe he can change. Then Present takes Scrooge to the Cratchit home, the husband Drew, several adopted children, including Tiny Tim. Scrooge has refused Bob's healthcare proposal, which gives the Tiny Tim plot a very real feel. Continuing on, this version includes one in ignorant, which a lot of adaptations skip, so credit where credit's due. Even though the execution is rough, this movie tries to honor the shape of Dickens. Then Christmas Future arrives. Future takes Scrooge to a world where his death is celebrated at his own club. The people who work for him sing about him being dead, and the community center he refused to help is struggling to stay open. And then we get the usual beats of stolen possessions, a pawn shop, the Cratchit's mourning Tiny Tim, and finally, Scrooge's grave. This section follows the Christmas Carol structure pretty closely. The biggest difference is that Scrooge's future does not only show he will die alone, it shows that his refusal to support the community will have a lasting negative impact. And because he sees the full cost of staying in touch, Scrooge finally breaks. Christmas morning comes, and Scrooge changes in the usual Dickens way. He sends food to the Cratchit, he visits Freda and Mary, he gives his employees bonuses, he makes Bob a partner, he gives him a raise, and he accepts the healthcare proposal. Later we learn he honors Bill, helps Fezziwig, and becomes part of Freda's family. He also becomes a father figure to Tim, and even, it seems, finds love again, wrapping things up in a nice Christmas bow. Scrooge is not only learning to be nicer, he is rejoining life. He is choosing community after spending decades treating togetherness and generosity like weakness. And then, after the credit, in fact as far after the credits as possible, we get one last little tag with Marley. His chains are loosened. So I guess the opening loophole paid off, and it feels very unfinished and kind of like an afterthought, but that's Scrooge and Marley. It's clunky, the effects are limited, and some of the songs are a bit much. But I do think the idea is solid and has real merit. It really tackles some serious themes, maybe not quite as fully as it could. It does take A Christmas Carol and asks, what would it look like if viewed from this lens? And it seems to understand the heart of A Christmas Carol. So with that being said, until next time.
Now just go, but be here all the earlier the next day.